First of all, in terms of personal statements, what they are not simply a restatement of your resume. I think we get a lot of clients who will come in and say, hey, all I need you to do is look at my personal statement and we're good to go. It's really not a restatement of your resume. They have your resume in most cases. You don't have to talk about your resume. They can look at that. They want to see something different, and we'll talk about that shortly. It's not just a laundry list of your accomplishments, right? Many, depending on the school application, whether it's law school or business school, they will have a list of many of your kind of what have you done since school, what have you done outside of work. They'll ask you kind of for this what's called like a short answer section. So they'll have that. And it's not just a restatement of your college admissions essay. Believe it or not, we have clients who kind of just take their college admissions, undergraduate admissions, and tweak it a little bit. Um, you know, it's not something where you go on the website and you're like, oh, this school talks a lot about this, so I'm just going to throw that in there in my personal statement and say that I want to do it. There's also, folks tend to go over the top with this sometimes and just, we've seen a rap. We've seen a fake legal brief for law school. We've seen a lot of interesting things, and it's not really about that. It's really about trying to be genuine, trying to bring who you are and what you want to be, and really talk about it in a genuine way. Not to say that you shouldn't be creative about that, but just to say that sometimes when you just try to be creative for the sake of being creative, and it doesn't really resonate who you are, that's not effective either. Um, it's not just kind of an optional essay or a place to just talk about, hey, I had some bad grades in school, but I want to do this. It's really more focused on who you are. And then finally, just stay away from, especially in this climate, controversial issues, um, too much talk about, politics unless it's part of who you are and who you want to be. Um, and sometimes you try to be funny, but it doesn't go over well, and you don't know if it goes over well because you're not there when they read it. Okay, so enough about what they aren't. Let's talk a little bit about what it should be. And by the way, personal statements are applicable to graduate schools, across that run the gambit, right? PhD programs, law school programs, general kind of specialized master's programs, MBA programs. While MBAs often don't have a specific personal statement, more and more of the MBA applications will have like an essay like HBS or something that says, hey, tell me about yourself, or, what should we know about you, or what differentiates you. So when we talk about personal statements, we talk about the broad definition of personal statement, which is just kind of this whole, tell me a little bit about yourself, tell me what makes you tick. So that's kind of how we define personal statements. It's really an opportunity for you to show the admissions committee who you are, right? What is your character? What is your personality? What do you bring to the table? And what are the unique attributes that you will bring the graduate school community? So it is truly an open letter to the admissions committee. And with that comes a lot of responsibilities. It is, frankly, in my opinion, more challenging to write than a very structured essay that asks you something very specific. It's an opportunity for you to demonstrate kind of personal growth and leadership. It's hard sometimes to articulate that in something like a resume, but it is a lot easier when you can provide context around stories and provide kind of that growth and leadership through stories in your particular background. It's a focused presentation of kind of why you are well suited for that particular school, right? So in addition to it being a story, a persuasive story about who you are and why you, or rather who you are, it's also a story about why that particular person is well suited for graduate school. So don't forget to kind of finish the job, if you will, and not only talk about who you are, what you've done, what makes you tick, but also why, kind of bring it back around to why you want to go to school and why you think you're going to be a good fit. It's a great opportunity for you to demonstrate your logical reasoning and persuasive skills. You may say logical reasoning, well, kind of how does that work? Well, I think you can demonstrate kind of your thought process of how you may have addressed particular situations in your background. And obviously, from a persuasive perspective, you're telling a story. So you want to tell a convincing story that ends with you getting into this school, right? And that story is really the essence of how you're going to sell yourself. But it's all about being authentic. It's all about knowing who you are and presenting who you are and being your authentic self.
You want to be able to sell the dream, right? What do we mean by that? Obviously, you want to ground them in, your interest, your passion. You need to be able to paint a clear picture of that, though. One of the big challenges when you're writing essays is that, people say, well, one of the big challenges is they don't spend enough time thinking about the dream and talking about the dream and exactly what you want to do. The other challenge is you're not really painting a clear picture. And sometimes you're not doing it because you don't know, right? So it's not that you have to be right. You just have to paint a clear picture. So oftentimes what I'll do with clients is say, okay, what kinds of things might you want to do? Okay, great. Let's lay them out there. Let's see what makes the most sense. You're not sure if you'll do consulting or marketing, but you have a particular strength in one particular area, and perhaps going in the consulting direction makes more sense because it's more generalized, and ultimately moving into a company, where you're kind of on the track to be a CMO is the way to go, right? Or maybe it's another path. But whatever it is, think about that path. Think about how your background will help you get to where you want to go. For full-time MBA programs, they know that you may be making a career transition, and that's okay. But how do the things that you've done historically lead to your ability to execute in the future? So if you're a teacher today, you're a manager of 25, 30 people every day, every class. Talk about that management. Talk about the ability to lead up to your principal. Talk about your ability to motivate others when they don't necessarily have motivation, right? Use what you have. Talk about how you're going to get to where you want to go, and dream big. Business schools at the high end of the echelon don't want to hear that you want to, hey, I ultimately want to grow up and be someone who can be a contributor in an organization and work for someone who works for someone who works for someone who's important, right? That's not what business schools want. They want you to have confidence and say, you know what, I want to be that person. It doesn't have to be CEO, but maybe you're somebody who runs a particular division or has a particular focus at a very high level.
One of the tricky things about writing an effective essay or personal statement is you want to show passion and interest, but how do you balance that, with some of the other traits and backgrounds, with facts, and not look too over the top? Well, one of the first things to do there in terms of effectively demonstrating passion is to show it and not tell it, right? There are a million ways to tell someone that, you're inquisitive, or, you're an analytical person, or whatever the case may be, whatever the character trait is. But there are only a few ways for you to actually show it and demonstrate it through your stories, that if you've been following the curriculum here, you've developed your brand, you have stories that are supportive of your brand character traits. So one of the first things to do is just show it. Talk about it in the context of what you've actually done, as opposed to saying, you know what, I'm really this, I'm really that. Trust me. Another thing that goes along those same lines is to provide significant detail, and provide it detail from different angles. So if you want to talk about how you're a very generous person, or how you love to give back, instead of saying I love to give back, talk about how you're very involved as a leader in a volunteer club, and you've made this kind of impact. And also talk about how you've taken over, or you're leading the team at work to focus on social justice, in the workplace. So those are two ways where you're showing your passion for a particular thing without saying, over and over, I'm really passionate about X, Y, and Z. So make sure you show, don't tell, and make sure you're providing as much detail from different perspectives as possible. And that's the way to effectively demonstrate personal passion.
All right, so what is the application committee looking for? Well, admissions is really, when they're evaluating personal statements, they're looking for a couple of things. They're looking for intellectual aptitude. Is this the kind of person that is looking at situations, measuring what's going on, taking in information, and making the best decisions possible? So they can kind of pull that out of really good stories. So that's something important they're looking for. They're looking for specific skills relevant to graduate school. So, for law school, are you able to, make an argument, persuasive argument? For business school, are you able to crank through analytical problems and challenges? Whatever the graduate school is that you're applying for, they're going to be looking for those specific skills, in your personal statement that you may have demonstrated in the past. Does the applicant demonstrate moral character, especially for law school? I want to say not for business school, because I think business schools more and more are looking for that moral character. All schools are looking for that moral character. Really, have you been able to kind of demonstrate that? Maybe you had a challenge in the past, and you were able to kind of meet that challenge, even if it was kind of a tough situation, one that maybe have challenged your character. That could be something that you talk about specifically in your personal statement. And then will you be successful? So do you exhibit some of those traits that we talked about that will make you a successful candidate in graduate school? So maybe someone who had the odds stacked against them, they fought through it, they demonstrated that they were able to fight through it, and they are even better coming out of it. In my kind of quote unquote personal statement, I've talked about my battle with cancer. So that's who I am. That really made me the kind of person that I am today. And that was really important for me, right? To demonstrate, not just because I thought it would be, oh, wow, this guy's accomplished something that many who had this didn't accomplish, because I think a lot of that was just being in favorable circumstances. But that I was able to kind of push through it and still go to school and still accomplish the things that I wanted to accomplish. I didn't let that be something that held me back. So I think being able to demonstrate those kinds of skills, that you can fight through things, that you can persevere, is really important to showing potential success in graduate school. And also contribution. So this is a really important one, because all schools are looking for contributors to their programs, right? So not just people who can be accomplished on their own rights, but people who look outside of themselves and look to do things in the community, look to give back in general. And so your overall job is to craft this application that screams yes to each question. Yes, I have make a contribution to others. Yes, I'll be able to be successful in graduate school. Yes, I have character. I do have the skills. So when you're kind of going through a personal statement, you may not have all of these kind of nailed, but you should have at least a couple of them demonstrated in your personal statement. So when you're outlining your personal statement, use this as a guide.
So there is some natural tension between making sure that you're incorporating your own brand character traits in your essays and making sure that you are really speaking to the values of a particular program. And there's some nuances there that we'll talk a little bit about here. You want to be authentic, and you want to be true to yourself and really speak to selling your brand. But you also want to, whenever possible, incorporate some of those key areas that the schools are looking for without it looking forced. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, the number one priority in this case is be true to your brand, right? Let's say a school is all about teamwork, and a school is all about leadership, and a school is all about collaboration. Teamwork, leadership, collaboration. Well, hopefully right there you have some character trait that talks about team or collaboration, right? Because that is a theme that is clearly important. So let's make sure we get that in there at some point. Maybe you don't have a ton of leadership traits, but you really want to talk about some other areas that you think are strength of yours. So you'll incorporate the collaboration piece. You'll incorporate some piece on, being very analytic, being very entrepreneurial, which by nature demonstrates leadership. But you don't necessarily pull in something that, really, really speaks to leadership, which is one of the key areas of focus for the school. That's okay, right? You've gotten, kind of at least with the collaboration and the teamwork piece, you've really kind of delivered on that piece with a key character trait where you were able to speak to that. If you don't necessarily hit the leadership trait that they're looking at directly, on the first time, that's okay. Maybe there's some ways to talk about it in the interview. But you really want to be true to yourself and make sure you're telling the best story you can about your character traits and your particular stories that you want to bring up in your brand, but also to the extent that you can incorporating things that matter for the school. But don't worry if you don't get them all in. It's most important to be true to your own brand and then obviously tie in to the extent that you can whatever is important to the school in terms of fit. They're not looking for a one-size-fits-all candidate, but they are looking for certain commonalities that they think will make a good fit for the school.
Admit me, never apply alone.